Good morning, Barkley Brookers. Welcome to week 2 of distance learning. And we are going to get back to our fairy tale adventures. The story we're going to share today is Thumbelina. And this is written by Hans Christian Andersen. There are really two biggies in the world of fairy tales. We've talked about Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm a lot. The Grimm brothers have written many of those fairy tales that we know that Disney has turned into famous movies and toys and all kinds of things. But the other big guy is Hans Christian Andersen, and so Thumbelina is one of his stories. This one is retold by Brad Sneed. Retold just means that he just wrote it in his own words, kind of, but he didn't change the story too much. So it's a little bit different than the original, but not too much. This one stays pretty true to the original. Once there was a woman who wanted very much to have a child, but as the years passed, her wish was never granted. At last she went to visit an old witch to ask for her help. Patiently the witch listened and then replied, "Take this seed and plant it in a flower pot, but beware, for strong magic will never do exactly as you desire." The woman thanked the witch and hurried home. She planted the seed and watered it carefully. Immediately a lovely flower sprang up, though its petals stayed tightly closed. The woman was terribly disappointed, but said, "It is a beautiful flower," and she kissed the petals. As soon as she did, the flower opened to reveal a very tiny girl sitting inside. In fact, the child was scarcely as tall as the woman's thumb, and so she named her Thumbelina. Thumbelina was so little that she was able to use a walnut shell for a bed and flower petals for a mattress. During the day, she played on a table where the woman placed a dish full of water. A large tulip petal became her boat, and the tiny girl rowed from side to side with 2 oars made of horsehair. While she rowed, Thumbelina sang more sweetly than anything that had ever been heard. There she is in her tulip petal boat, rowing from side to side in her dish of water. One night a big toad crept through the open window and leaped on the table where Thumbelina was sleeping. "What a pretty wife she would make for my son," said the toad, and she took up the walnut shell and jumped through the window into the garden. The toad lived with her son on the muddy bank of a nearby stream. When he saw Thumbelina, the son began to croak excitedly. "Hush, or you'll wake her," said the mother toad. "Then she might run away. Now, help me put her on one of the lily pads. She's so very small it will seem like an island to her, and she'll never be able to escape. Quickly, and then we must prepare your new home under the marsh." Here's the mama toad, and there is her son, the toad. And here is Thumbelina still sleeping in her walnut bed. Early the next morning, Thumbelina woke and was startled to find herself on a lily pad in the middle of a stream. She could see nothing but water on every side of the large green leaf and no way of reaching land. She began to cry for help until at last the mother toad swam out to the lily pad with her son. The old toad said, "Hush, child, I want you to meet my son. He is to be your husband, and you will live happily together under the marsh." "Croak, croak, croak," was all her son could say for himself. And then the toad stole Thumbelina's walnut shell bed and swam away, for they were still not finished with their preparations. As soon as they were out of sight, Thumbelina began to cry louder for help. Fortunately, the fish who swam in the water had heard everything. It made them sorry to think the poor girl must go and live with the horrible toads. They nibbled away at the lily stalk until Thumbelina's leaf was set free and started to drift downstream. So this is a lily pad, and this part floats on top of the water, but underneath there's a stem that's connected to the ground. And so these fishies are helping Thumbelina by nibbling through that stem, that stalk, so that it will float away on the river as the water moves. That's what they're doing down there. I just explained it, Brody. Thumbelina sailed past many towns and was happy, for now the toads could not possibly catch her. She enjoyed feeling the warm sunshine on her face. A butterfly fluttered around her and at last lighted on her lily pad. Thumbelina gave one end of the sash to the butterfly and fastened the other end to her lily pad, which now glided faster than ever. As they neared a bend in the stream, suddenly a large beetle flew by. Whoosh! The moment he caught sight of Thumbelina, he grabbed her and flew to a tree.
Why did he grab her?
Because he thinks she's beautiful. He wants to keep her. There's the big, giant beetle. Beetle is an insect, right? So it has 6 legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yep. And they also have spikes on their feet.
Mm-hmm. That helps them to hold on to things. Thumbelina cried out and begged him to let her go. But the beetle seated himself by her side, gave her some honey to eat, and told her she was very pretty, though not in the least like an insect. Meanwhile, all the beetles who lived in the trees stared curiously at Thumbelina and turned up their feelers at her. One said, "She has only 2 legs. How ugly that looks." "She has no feelers," said another. "She looks just like a human being. Oh, she is ugly," they all exclaimed. The beetle who had captured Thumbelina listened to the others, growing more dejected with each insult. Finally, he decided he would have no more to do with her. He flew Thumbelina down from the tree and dropped her on a daisy. Surprised but unharmed, Thumbelina began to laugh, happy to be free again. There's the other insects looking at Thumbelina and kind of making fun of her. They're not being very kind. That summer, Thumbelina lived all alone in the forest. She wove herself a bed of grass and hung it under a wide leaf to protect herself from the rain. She ate honey from the flowers and drank the dew from their leaves every morning. But as autumn days turned to winter, all the birds who had sung to her flew away. The leaves on the trees turned brown, and soon it began to snow, and the snowflakes, as they fell upon her, were like a whole shovelful falling on one of us, for we are tall, while she was only 2 inches high. So here she is in her bed that she made. So if you have a mommy or a daddy or a grandma or grandpa or maybe an auntie or uncle who does knitting or crocheting and they make scarves or blankets or hats, that's what she did with the grass to make this hammock. Near the woods lay a large cornfield, but only the dry stubble remained. Still, for Thumbelina, it was like struggling through a large wood. Oh, how she shivered with the cold. She came at last to the door of a field mouse who lived in a snug underground den. Thumbelina knocked timidly to beg for a morsel of food. "You poor little creature," said the field mouse, "come into my warm den and have something to eat." The mouse was so pleased to have company that she said, "You're welcome to stay with me all winter if you like, but you must keep my rooms clean and neat and sing songs for me, for I love to hear music." Thumbelina did everything the field mouse asked and began to feel very comfortable in her new house. So here she is singing for the field mouse. "We'll have a visitor soon," said the field mouse one day. "My neighbor the mole is stopping by. He is even better off than I am. If you could only have him for a husband, you would be well provided for indeed." But when the mole came to visit, Thumbelina discovered that she did not care for him at all. He preferred being underground, did not like the sun or the blue sky or even the flowers. He seemed very grumpy. After supper, the mole invited Thumbelina and the field mouse to take an evening stroll using the long passage he had dug to his own dwelling. Halfway along, they came across a dead swallow. The mole pushed it aside and said, "How dreadful to be a bird. It can't even survive the winter." The field mouse loudly agreed, but Thumbelina kept silent. When the 2 others had turned their backs, she gently stroked the bird's feathers. "Little swallow, is it you who sang to me this summer?" she whispered. But then the field mouse said that they must be getting home as it was growing late. There's the mole, and there they are with the swallow. During the night, Thumbelina could not stop thinking of the swallow. She crept out of bed and wove a large blanket out of hay, and then she carried it to the dead bird and spread it over him. "Poor thing," she said, and she rested her head on the bird's breast, only to hear something inside the bird go thump, thump. It was the bird's heart. He was not really dead, only frozen with cold. "Thank you, dear girl," said the weak swallow. "I feel so warm that I think I will soon be able to fly." "Oh no," said she, "it's snowing outside now, but rest, and I will take care of you until you are well again." That whole winter the swallow remained underground while Thumbelina nursed him, though she never dared tell the mole or the field mouse, for they did not like swallows or any other kind of bird. There she is helping the bird. Here's his face.
Well, doing everybody.
At last it was spring, and the swallow felt well enough to fly. Thumbelina opened a hole in the roof of the tunnel, and the sun shone in. As he prepared for his journey, the swallow invited her to go with him, but Thumbelina knew it would make the field mouse very sad if she left, and so she said no. "I will miss you," said the swallow, and away he flew. Thumbelina felt tears spring to her eyes, but dutifully she returned to her chores. There's the swallow flying away.
What did you say?
Late that summer, the field mouse announced, "I have wonderful news, Thumbelina. The mole has asked to marry you. What a lucky day for a humble child like you. I have already hired 4 spiders to weave the lace for your wedding gown. Stop, please, let go." "I cannot marry the mole," said Thumbelina. "I do not love him." "Nonsense," replied the field mouse. "Don't be pig-headed. He is a very handsome mole. The queen herself does not wear more beautiful velvets and furs. You ought to be thankful for such good fortune." And though Thumbelina protested, the mouse would hear no more complaints. So there are the spiders, and they're weaving the beautiful lace for her gown. Please, Brody, don't do that. The poor girl was very unhappy and wanted to run away, but she knew winter was coming and she might freeze in the forest, and so she stood at the door for her last glimpse of summer flowers. Suddenly she heard her old friend the swallow calling to her from the sky. He landed at her doorstep, and Thumbelina poured out her troubles to him. "I am about to make my winter journey to warmer lands," said the swallow. "Will you join me this time?" "Yes, I will," said Thumbelina, and she climbed up onto the bird's back. The swallow rose into the air and flew over the forest and to the mountains and then high over the sea until they reached the warm countries where trees were heavy with fruit and the air was fragrant with flower blossoms. Finally, they came to a lake where there stood the ruins of an old palace. Vines clustered around its pillars, and at the top were many swallows' nests. "Here is my home," said the swallow, "but for you there are flowers below. Would you like to choose one as your new home?" The swallow flew down, and Thumbelina slid from his back onto a large flower. How surprised she was to see, in the middle of that very flower, a tiny little man. He had a crown on his head and delicate wings at his shoulders, and was not much larger than Thumbelina herself.
What did you say? Then Thumbelina.
"Oh, how wonderful he is," whispered Thumbelina to the swallow. At first the little king was frightened by the bird, who appeared like a giant to him. But when he saw Thumbelina, he was enchanted. He asked her name and if she would stay, perhaps one day be his wife, the queen of all the flowers. This certainly was a very different sort of husband from the son of the toad or the disagreeable mole. And so Thumbelina said yes to the handsome king with the kind face. She took his hand, and then all the flowers opened, and out of every one came more tiny people. Each of them brought Thumbelina a gift, but the best was a pair of wings, so that she too could fly from flower to flower. And then there was much rejoicing, and the swallow sang to them about Thumbelina and her adventures. She is with the king, and here they are bringing her her very own set of wings. And when winter came to an end, it was time for the swallow to say farewell and make his yearly journey back to Denmark. And there he had a nest over the window of a house in which lived the writer of fairy tales. And every evening, as the sun would set, the swallow sang, "Tweet, tweet," and from his song came this very story. The end. And who, my friends, do you think that writer might have been?
Mom,
So why don't you make a comment in the comment section and tell me what was your favorite part? Was it the witch who granted the kindly old lady her wish? Was it the toad and the toad mother who stole Thumbelina away? Was it the beetle who snatched Thumbelina up? Or maybe it was the butterfly who helped Thumbelina escape down the river? Was it the mouse or the mole or the swallow or the prince? What was your favorite part of the story, my friends? All right, enjoy the rest of your day.
No, no.